I should repeat that again. This is my first rodeo with this, my very first town hall. And Eric, my wonderful tech guru, suggested doing this. So it's kind of an after party after the series. And for those of you that are joining on now, I'm so thankful that everybody has is a part of this. And I have some wonderful speakers here that that I'd like to introduce you to today. But first, I'd like to start with why I decided to do this. And the series was inspired by my own circumstances. I had gotten physically ill in the last year, and it started at the end of 2019. And previous to that, I had lost my dad and had transitioned him myself. Many of people know this because they've watched the interviews. But I kept thinking all this while last year when I was really sick about how can I help? How can I help? And I couldn't even help myself. I couldn't hardly walk. I had the start of systemic arthritis all over my body. Psoriatic and osteo was what they told me. And the whole check engine light on the inside of my body was going off everywhere. And so, you know, with the pandemic, I didn't know there were so many people that were helping one another and jumping on. And so this year I decided, how can I take the experience that I went through and now help exponentially? And I found 23 speakers that were so loving and that wanted to be a part of this. And I'm thankful to every one of them that have shown up here. And you're going to have a chance to get to meet them. But with this journey that you're on, watch the series. If you've watched the series or you've missed different parts of that, we're going to have an online, we're going to make a lifetime access available, and it'll be ready probably within the week after this is over with. So, you know, stay in contact with me. You know, don't worry. This community is just going to build and build and build. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce a few people here that have shown up. And if any of the other speakers have shown up and I don't know that you're here, let me know. But I'd like to start off and introduce Gail Jett, who has joined us. And she's here. And if anyone has a few questions that they'd like to ask Gail, welcome, Gail.
Thank you, Diana. Happy to be here.
So, Gail, what made you want to be a part of the series?
I think it spoke to me because I work with a lot of clients who are experiencing grief, and especially now. But back when I first talked to you, I was actually dealing with some unfinished business of my own, which you and I talked about, and you gave me some amazing closure on that. So thank you very much for that piece.
I don't know.
Yes, it was regarding my dad.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. And with your, you know, with what I know that you did some amazing tips. You had amazing tips for during your interview. What would you tell everybody right now that's still going through this journey that they're on? They might have just lost somebody, or, you know, they're still trying to move forward with their life.
Well, I would say the first thing is to take advantage of all the contributions from the various people here. I know personally for myself, well, not for myself necessarily, but for a lot of my clients, those who are dealing with grief specifically, there are some acupressure points that I give them because I work in energy healing, and energy gets into bad habits like we do. I mean, it's just the way it is. And the great thing is it can be repatterned And so it's about learning a new energetic habit and to get yourself into a place of a new default. And what I can say personally about grief, having lost my father, my mother, and various others, is that it's so horribly painful in the beginning, and I think everybody can relate to that. And you feel like you're never going to be okay, that this is never going to go away. But the good news is it begins to lessen, the pain gets better over time. But I do believe that, you know, with the contributions of the folks here and just some of the things that I've learned for myself, you can ease the pain. You know, you're not getting rid of it, but you're easing it. And it takes the emotional charge off of it so that it's not like you forget the person or the situation or the pet or whatever, but it helps to get you to a place where you can look at them and not, you know, picture, for example, and not be triggered as much as in the beginning. So what I would say with people is to hang in there, give yourself grace, have compassion and patience for yourself in the same way that you would show for somebody else, and know that we all go through this at our own rate. There's no set time.
Right.
As I think I mentioned on my interview, where I work in healthcare, not in conventional anymore, but we, in healthcare, we sort of look at it like if we lose a patient, we have failed. And the reality is, no, we haven't, because, you know, we all have what I like to call a shelf life, or an expiration date, and that's going to happen because it happens for all of us. But rather, when we lose someone, or, you know, we have this kind of misguided notion, I believe, that, you know, when you lose a pet, for example, you're supposed to be kind of over it, you know, 3 months, whatever. And the reality is that's absolutely untrue. And I bet pretty much everybody on here would relate. I still have a dog that's very important to me that I lost 20 years ago, and she still matters, right? And then the other piece of it is like when we lose our human family members and friends and things like that, there's this kind of 1 year, you're supposed to be over it. And that's not true either. And we all know that, you know, I mean, my father died 11 years ago, and I really wish he was here, particularly today, because he was such a wise sage. And I would love to sit down and ask him his opinion about all of this stuff going on, you know. So yeah, I miss him every day.
Yeah.
So there's no statute of limitations on grief. And I think that's what I want to leave people with, is we move through it at our own pace.
Right. And having the access to all of you, and as well as myself, as facilitators to help in that journey. So thank you so much. What I think I'll do is I'll move through all the speakers that are here, and then we'll go back to Q&A at the end. So Masami, are you there? Masami has joined us, and Masami.
There you go. I
Loved
think I unmuted. Okay.
Everyone loved your interview. So is there some things that you want to share about why you decided to do the interview series with me and our initial conversation?
Well, I mean, Diana, come on, you're such a beautiful human being. I couldn't say no to your invitation, first of all. And I think that's what all of us were gifted with. And I cherished times that we could spend together. And I find your just the groundedness and the beauty that you embody was so amazing that I just had to say yes to doing this with you. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to all that you put in to creating this. I know this was a lot of work on your part, and, I could feel it, but it came from such a loving, deep understanding of what it is to be a human being. So I appreciate that very, very much, Diana. And I think you need to hear that. from me, but from all of us as well. So thank you.
Well,
Namaste to your heart and namaste to all your hard work. Yeah. So,
And
yeah, go ahead.
what would you like to say to, by the way, if people are leaving me chats, Eric's going to have to direct, because after my cataract surgery, I can't really see the small print without my glasses. So please.
Yeah, Diana, we're having some good commentary so far. Everyone's saying, I agree, Diana, you're amazing, so beautiful. Thank you very much for doing the seminar. We did have a couple questions we'll get back to in a minute.
Okay, that'd be great. Eric's going to be my eyes for this. But Masami, is there something that you wanted to share with everybody that inspires from coming from your heart?
Yeah, I think to mature as a human being, we do go through grieving. It's that the depth of the grief gives us the container to hold joy and to contain us to take in the beauty of this world that really is all around us. So what I would say is, don't be afraid of deepest part of the grief. Don't be afraid to go down and descend, because the deeper you can descend, the deeper you can ascend. And I think there's so much emphasis right now on the ascension, the changes, the energetic fields are changing. I'm an intuitive, I'm a health intuitive, and I work in functional nutritional therapy world. And there's so much emphasis on how do we expand who we are, so much outward. And what I say to all my clients is to descend, go deeper into who you are, because the deeper the roots you are able to go into this Mother Gaia, the higher you can reach to the universe and cosmos. So I think that's what grief teaches us, is to go much, much deeper in the roots of who we are. And we can do this because we are equipped to grieve so deeply and so strongly and so miserably at times, so that we can contain the beauty and joy and love that we're meant to experience. So that's what I want to say. Yeah. And we're going to grieve forever. So stop looking for the end to grieving, because grieving is like a spiral. It just looks a little different. Maybe the next year. Every season has a different clarity or sensations or a taste or colors that will show up for you. But because we are able to grieve, we can see the humanity in all of us and to find connections between us, because I'm from Japan, right? So I am a little bit more in the Taoist side of thinking, but if we don't know the darkness, we don't know the light. So that's why we have the range of emotions that we get to experience as human beings. So really go with it, go into it. You have the tools and capabilities and grit and strength and resiliency to move through these waves. It's not a solid waves. Waves come in and out. So take a breather sometimes. Join a group like this. Maybe go into the stillness sometimes, but don't be afraid to go into the messiness and join the sandbox of grief sometimes and find others around you. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you so much. And to your point, I think a community like this, I can't remember now, and it could have been you. I'm just like, out of the speakers, it's like we are one, because it almost became, during these interviews, like the synergy of what was coming through was like the divine. And when your body is ready, you will be prepared. And Ashley Jones, I know that she wants to be here. I'm not sure she's here because she's doing a fundraiser for their nonprofit, Love Not Lost. But she mentioned it in her interview about our bodies are designed to heal. But it's in your own time that you can face certain demons that are in your closet. So I kept getting mail from people saying, oh my God, this landed for me just in the right time. And it's so true. Because when you have that support system there, you're not doing this alone. And I want to thank you so much for your feedback about Masami, you moving the energy and you helping people understand that our gut is very much connected with our emotions. And, how we poop also shows us how we feel, right? So that's a whole nother, you guys are going to have to stay in the group. We're going to get, and we'll share more on the physical side of things. But I'd love to bring Ashley Bush on if she's there.
Before we do that, Diana, we had a wonderful comment here that ties right into the variety of speakers from Mrs. Peters. I just wanted to read it. She said, I appreciate the realness and peacefulness and calmness of Diana and all the speakers. I've never experienced with such a wide variety of speakers. You all brought a connectedness that taught me so much.
Oh, well,
That's from
you.
Mrs. Peters.
Thank you. Hi, Ashley.
Hello. Hi there. I'm so glad to be with all of you. Can you hear me all right?
We can now, yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, it's lovely to be here with you and all the speakers and all the participants, and with you, of course, Diana. Thank you for having me.
Well, so when I contacted you, I know that you live in a couple different locations. And what made you want to go ahead and do the summit?
Well, I think the topic of grief is so important to openly discuss, that we live in a grief-averse society, really. We don't like messy feelings. We don't like painful feelings. We don't want to talk about what's difficult. And as Masami was saying, you need to descend before you can ascend. So I was delighted to shed some light on this topic, which I feel is so important to discuss.
Yes, very well said. And I don't know if everyone got to watch your interview, but what made you want to go into this?
Well, I entered this field over 30 years ago when I was starting my training as a social worker, where my very first client was a bereaved woman whose sister had been murdered. And in that session, right away, I just got almost a hearing, a nudge, a voice saying, this is what you were put on the planet to do, to work with grievers. So I've been doing it for 30 years and writing books and trying to help people in emotional pain. And I'd like to leave people with the idea that love is at the center of all of this, of everything we're discussing, because you wouldn't be grieving if you hadn't felt a deep love. And whether that's, losing a loved one, ending a marriage, moving, leaving a job, watching your children grow up. I mean, we encounter loss all the time, everywhere we go. It's the condition of being alive. But really, again, at the center of it all is love. And so we want to celebrate that love. And I'm a big believer that while you grieve, while you have to feel the pain and maybe shed many tears and years of some sorrow, I try to help people remember that it's the love that you can carry forward. The love and the experiences and the memories and the heart and the connection with that experience or person or animal that you lost, they are still with you. They are really the wind beneath your wings. They are imprinted in your heart and soul. So the idea of moving forward without them is essentially intolerable. And I try to help people remember that you're moving forward very much with them, always.
Yes, very well said. And I feel that those spirits come through. I felt that some of the things that they come through loved ones, it's really interesting because, even though I thought I was over everything, when I did Ashley's interview, she made an interesting comment when we went to end the session. And she said, enjoy the journey of healing that you're doing for yourself in this series. And I thought, what's she talking about? Like, I'm done grieving. Well, I wasn't, And through all of the speakers, I wanted to thank every single one of them, because with each of your interviews, you were a facilitator in my growth and my own healing. And certain things that you said would make me think later, and pause. And then when I did your write-ups and I put them all in a journal, and the journals themselves, if anybody wants to still get them, they can. It has everybody's bio. It has every way that you can still, connect with them, because that's what I also often hate being in a series. Like, I'll catch some speakers and then I forget how to connect with them later. So I definitely wanted to build this community for people. And thank you so much for sharing. Is there anything that you'd like to say to everyone before we go to the next speaker?
Well, I guess I'm just touched to hear that, Diana, that my words impacted you that way and helped you. And I would say for all people, the journey is always continuing. We are continuing to grow, to learn, to deepen, to transcend. And so as long as you're alive and even beyond, I would suggest the journey continues. So try to enjoy the ride and learn what you can and share what you can and just keep growing.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this.
My pleasure, my honor. Thank you.
Eric, if you're there, we're gonna.
I am, Diana. I see a couple other speakers. I see Dave Markowitz.
We're gonna go to Carla first.
Carla.
Is she there?
Gotcha. I don't see Carla. Oh, there we go. Carla coming up right now. Oops.
Hi, Carla. So,
Hi.
and we're coming from North Carolina?
Virginia. I'm in Richmond, Virginia.
Virginia. Okay.
I was in North Carolina when you and I talked the first time. So
Yes, yes, by the beach.
that's right.
So that's
Good time. That's right.
I want to thank you for being a part of this. And gosh, the first time that you and I talked, I mean, we talked up a storm and I thought we wouldn't have anything to talk about in the interview, but I was wrong because we had lots to talk about. And so would you just want to share why you decided to go ahead and do the interview series?
Well, probably one of the biggest things was because, you and I just like clicked so well. I mean, we, like you said, we talked for a long time and it was great. And also because a lot of the same reasons everybody else is saying, I consider myself to be a grief activist. And a lot of that is because, I remember in my early grief, finding myself in these positions of having to choose to educate the people around me on my process. And it's not fair that a grieving person is in those positions of having to tell, friends and family and coworkers, what is really happening with them and what's not okay and kind of what's normal. And sometimes people elect not to do that. And that feels very isolating and disconnecting. And so now that, I'm much further along on my journey and I also happen to have, the kind of position and job where I can do that kind of education, I want to change the way that society sees grief. Just like Masami said, we live in this incredible, or maybe Ashley said it, this incredibly grief-averse world, and it's not very hospitable to grieving people. Everything that our culture and society thinks about grief is mostly wrong. And then we as grieving people also internalize that. Like we think that this is the way it's supposed to be. And then we have this completely different experience and we think that we're crazy or something's wrong with us or we're not doing this right. And really, and even the research bears this out, the people who are going through grief go through it in totally different ways than what the diagnostic criteria says that we're supposed to be or should be, and what culture thinks and what religious institutions think. And it's really unfair because it's a problem. And so to me, having this opportunity to be able to share in educating and not just the public, but also helping people who are going through grief to know, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. It's painful, but it's not abnormal. It's okay for you to be feeling these things. I know it's not any fun to be like on the floor sobbing your face off 3 or 4 times a day, but it's not abnormal. I totally remember that. And it's no fun, but there's nothing wrong with you. It's not pathological, no matter what everybody else tells you, and helping other people to get that, to have the confidence, like the inner resources to say, this is my truth, and like Walt Whitman says, whatever insults your soul, reject it. And that's how I feel about the way that culture and society view grief. And I want to help other people to feel empowered on their own journey and their own developmental process, because that is what it is. And like Masami says too, I 100% agree, to help people to not be afraid of those dark places, because, we need the darkness. The sun and the moon exist in the same sky. Everything that's growing needs a period of rest, and we need to have those places of darkness. And if not for the darkness, then we wouldn't even know what light is. I mean, we need both of these things, and we see it all on our grief journey, and helping people to know that it's okay to be where you are, even when where you are really sucks, is kind of it's what I want to do. So, and so do you, and being with all these other people in this series that are also sharing that message, and albeit in different ways. And that's wonderful, because like you're saying, that interwoven thread of the connection is there throughout. And that's just a beautiful thing. So thank you for letting me be part of it.
Oh, well, that's beautiful, Carla. And I have somebody on here. She wasn't part of the show, but she took a big stand and wanted to have National Grief Awareness nationally. And so it's a movement to have National Grief Awareness Day. And she's put that into place. Angie Cartwright, who I'm not sure if you're on here, but I want to recognize you for those exact things that what Carla had said, that people don't recognize that people are going through difficult times, and it's just not going to be like a snap of the fingers, like, hey, snap out of it.
Yeah.
It's in order, the only way out is through. And I used to tell that to every cancer patient that would get a diagnosis, and it would be like a deer in the headlights. And it was the mental and the emotional pain of dealing with the deceivement, like feeling that their bodies had deceived them and that they had done something wrong. So they went through their own cathartic process. And you have to also grieve that your body is no longer what it used to be, right? And so when we go through a traumatic loss, we're not that same person that we were before that trauma happened.
No.
And every single person that's in this space, I think, and all of the speakers that are a part of this can really, thank you so much for being the voice, for being the advocate. Eric I don't know who else is next, but I'll let you let us know.
Yeah, the names I recognize anyway. I see Dave Markowitz here. If you want to bring him up for a few words.
Sure, sounds good.
Hey there.
Hi,
Good to see you again.
nice to see you as well. Thank you so much.
Of course.
So I met Dave, and immediately, if you've ever met someone, you just feel like, I mean, he has this effect on you, like you just kind of like melt and you completely feel safe. Within 5 minutes of meeting him, I knew that I wanted him to speak on the series. And I didn't know, by reading his bio and seeing, I think you were on the Shift Network. I can't remember how I found you, or my assistant found you, but as soon as I met you, it was your voice, and you just had this calming effect. And then he lovingly sent me a book which I completely resonated with. And so welcome. Why don't you share about why you decided to do the series?
Well, first, thank you for those very kind words. I'm touched, so thanks. Why did the series? Well, a couple of reasons. One was our connection. Just speaking to you for a few minutes at a similar feeling. And I trust my intuition. I trust my gut completely. It's what guides my life when I'm smart anyway. There are moments when I don't and end up in trouble, but I listened to my intuition, and my intuition was just, yeah, you need to do this. And I didn't even need to ask why at that point. So that was there. But also because in addition to what all the other speakers have said so far, and so beautifully and so eloquently, and thank you all for that, the additional part that I bring to this equation is absorbed grief from other people. So I tend to work with empaths and highly sensitive persons. Being one, perhaps, I guess I just resonate that out and have written books about that, about how sensitives and empaths said to have different needs, not just nutrition, socially, but also in healing. And what I've noticed from doing this work for so long, 2.5 decades in total, is that sometimes we are dealing with something over and over and over. And when we really step back or descend, as was earlier pointed out as well, I've found that sometimes we're carrying that grief from someone else or several people, or even from the collective unconscious. So my intuition led me to that, and then led me to having steps and processes for working with that. So in addition to everything that's been said, that's another aspect. And I felt it was really important to share that, because that was part of my own journey, being, depressed and wanted to, leave the planet at times, and eventually realizing it wasn't even my own grief that I was carrying. And that doesn't mean that I don't have my own, but I was weighed down an extra amount, burdened, because I was carrying so much for some other people. And I had to really go in and see, why was that? What am I getting out of that? And eventually realized it might have served me when I was younger, but it's not serving me any longer. And maybe just as important, it's not serving the other people either. It's like I'm walking their soul path for them. So Spirit gave me some processes to give that energy back to them. So I really wanted to bring that out to the world. Like I said, I've done the Shift Network several times and 2 best-selling books. But that doesn't mean that even if one person who, Spirit knew was going to be here needed to hear that information, it's easily worth my time to do it. So again, thank you for that.
Oh, well, yes, I completely, I just hope that this is, again, when I was sitting on the couch a year ago and we were in the midst of the pandemic, and I was thinking about, how can I serve? How can I help? And I felt so far behind the marathon of being able to, my natural inclination as a caregiver is to, like, I want to save, right? And so this was a way that I came up with of helping to highlight several different, and I want to continue this. So all the speakers that are here, and anyone else that I haven't met yet that is, in this vocation, look me up, connect with me, because this party's just getting started. So with that, I would like to bring on another speaker, or Eric, if you want to guide us.
Sure, Diana. I don't see any other speakers that I recognize, and I don't have the full list of names in front of me. I apologize for that. But if there's any other speakers that would like to come on, raise your hand or chat in the chat box here. If not, we'll move on to a couple comments we had, Diana. So Carla says she was wondering if anyone would like to discuss the difference between a message from a medium and an ADC. Mediums have mostly confirmed for me what I have received. Such a blessing. And she says some other things too in there. But would anyone like to discuss the difference between a message from a medium and an ADC? And what I can do is we can open it up so anyone can unmute themselves and jump in at this time if they have any comments on that subject.
Okay. The difference between a medium and a what, Eric?
And in ADC, she said, Carla, maybe you want to clarify that? Go ahead and unmute yourself if you want.
Hi. ADC is after death communication that can come through in many different ways, through electronics, through actually hearing or feeling the person. Diane, I had mentioned to you about my son hugging me, and then I received the text like seconds later that he was doing that. So throughout my life, I've experienced ADCs with different people. And I'm just curious, I was listening to your medium and I said, well, am I a medium? I went, no, I don't think I am. But I do get messages. And I'm just wondering if anybody's ever talked about the difference, just us regular folk.
Well, here's my 25 cents on this. And this is my own journey. When we're walking this path, and we're evolving, you're going through this spiritual awakening and you're peeling like an onion. And, my belief system is we have these lessons that we want to learn. And when we're ready, we start to step into that space and into the more spiritually inclined you get, the more sensitive you get to things around you. And you start to sense communication. And so I'd never heard of ACD before, or ADC. But I had experienced this. And in the beginning, it was just like a labor contraction. I didn't know, it was very subtle, but I believe all of us, I believe the other side is trying to communicate with all of us. And the fact that you're just getting more and more perceptive to that, you're just spiritually, unpeeling like an onion. You're just really stepping into this path. And kudos to you. Mediums that are there, that have already, they recognize, they acknowledge their gifts, they use their gifts in a professional way. They've been able to fine tune their gifts. That's a whole different category, but this after death communication, and that's really the crux of all of this, is why, because of the experience that I had in transitioning my father and the continued communication that I have with him, is what made me want to do the summit. But the long-term goal is about doing a documentary. And this type of communication, these experiences that people have, the funniest story, Tim Braun was talking during the interview, and this woman was doing jam. She was making jam. And then in the middle of watching the interview on the laptop, there start to be like photos spinning of her husband. Now her husband's been gone. He was not tech savvy. She says, I quickly tried to wash my hands, and as soon as I tried to get to the computer, it was gone. She said, so whomever on the other side is helping him, because he's not tech support at all, he needed help. And she said, that was my communication from him. So all of you, if you have instances like this, please, please, please reach out to me, email me. I'm going to keep all of them. I'm going to find the right team to be able to put this together, to have a documentary of how we have this communication on the other side. So I love your question. And I don't know if anyone else has an answer.
Yeah, if anyone else wanted to jump in on that one, or we do have a couple other questions as well, Diana. Okay, well, feel free to type any comments in the chat box as we go along. So Diana, we had another question come in here from Corby Lou. Would like to ask Dave to share some more insight on the relationship between interconnectedness and grief. Wonder if Dave would be able to do that.
We'll find out. Sure, it's a great question. Thank you, Corby. So, we often hear things like we're all one, we're all connected. But until we have a real visceral experience of that, it's just knowledge, it's just words, it's just the left brain maybe having a little party. But once we get that feeling in our body, it's very different. Then we really know how important it is to be compassionate to the self and to others. And what I found from doing this work, especially again with empaths and sensitives, is that we tend to be a little bit more in touch with that connection, but I still wanted to bring it even further. And, I'll just speak first person. When I realized I was holding my mother's grief for so long, it actually, in a way, brought me closer to her. It was one of the ways that I connected with her, but it was also unhealthy. So by actually giving the energy back to her through those processes that I briefly mentioned earlier, I not only healed myself from a lot of things, but also felt a deeper and better connection to her. And it just really showed me experientially about that interconnectedness. If I can feel someone else's grief or anger or whatever it is, clearly we're very connected. So in a maybe indirect way, it's my way of proving oneness. And I think if we all get a sense of that, we can all be a lot nicer to each other. So it's a goal.
Thank you very much for sharing that.
We have one more, Diana, here. Also from Carla. I don't know if it's the same Carla, but she says, my grief has been debilitating and I cannot hold space for my clients. I need to be clear, intuitive, inspirational, and wise. My private practice members are all on hold. I'm doing all I can not to be fearful. I'm open to any help. So grief has been debilitating and she can't hold space for her clients. Does anyone have any advice for that? Feel free to unmute yourself and jump in.
The concern is around finances. And the kind of work I do is, I really do have to be in a space to be able to, serve other people, and I'm just not there. And they know that. And so the concern comes, and I don't want it to, blow me out anymore about, how do you pay the bills? I can't work, at least not yet. And, going into some savings now, and it's a concern. So I'm just putting it out there, and I don't know what the answer is other than just try and get through it. But, that's hard. And I love my work, but yeah, I'm not able to hold the kind of space that I need to hold.
Might have something there.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, Dave, you want to go first, and then I'll have a tap to that.
I've found this with a lot of people I work with. I tend to work with a lot of practitioners, and as frustrating as it is, and I do get that, in a way, potentially it's a gift, because what if it's the universe showing you, you just need to work on you right now? And from that place, obviously we don't know how long that is or what that looks like. That's something that you have to determine, as far as how to work with it. But just kind of making that little mental switch there for a second, say, oh, I'm actually being protected, especially if you're empathic and you're taking on so much from your clients, then you're, kind of being more of a martyr than really a supporter. And that doesn't serve you. So just kind of toss that in, see if it feels right.
Thank you.
Sure.
I would comment too, so last fall, or maybe it was at the beginning of the year, I think it was like in March or so, and I still wasn't back. This is the first thing that I've jumped into in well over a year and a half, because I was so sick. And I jumped into a clubhouse room, and there was a coach, an intuitive coach that was running the room, and she was very spiritual. And I said some type of a question, and she said, you've helped so many. She said, it's your time to receive. And the universe is saying, it's your time to receive. Because I said, I just want to get up. It's like watching a baseball game and everybody's up to bat, and you want to get up, you want to get out, you want to join the game, right? But for those of us that are in here in this room, that you're facilitators, and I would guess probably that 90% of the people that are in this room are caregivers.
Mhm.
And the reason why I say that is because you're in touch with your feelings and you're empathic. You're empathetic. The caregivers they were the ones that I experienced that ended up with the cancer, because we don't listen, we don't honor our body. So to Dave's point, if it's a gift, and finding ways for other people, like I have with this series, where I'm able to take my gift and go like this because I have all of them. You know what I mean? Where I'm trying to make a difference and trying to help. So that's just an idea. And Ashley, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'll just jump in on that. Am I unmuted? You're able to hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I think that when a person is grieving, it's true that you need to sort of toggle between a being with the intense emotional experience and a shifting toward light. So this toggling between being with and shifting toward light. And I would say for you, Carla, that if you can remember this is a temporary situation and receive the gift, as people are saying, but to also keep shifting towards light. And what I mean by that is towards abundance, towards goodness, towards blessings, towards love. And even if that's just noticing beautiful flowers and light coming through the trees and remembering the beautiful experiences you had with your loved one, and looking at the people that support you and how communities fall in to serve you, that when you keep focusing on all that goodness, it really translates as abundance in multiple ways. Abundance of blessings, abundance of love, abundance of goodness, abundance of kind, caring people. And you start to attract abundance in general into your life again. So gratitude will take you up toward the light. Good luck.
Very, very beautiful. Thank you. Very.
So Diana, we had a couple of other comments, getting back to the previous question about medium and an after-death connection. And then we had one about health.
Okay. Gail, did you have, I'm looking here.
Yep, Gail had a comment she wanted to make about after-death connections here.
Gail, are you there?
Yes. Yeah, I was percolating on that and thinking about it, and a couple of thoughts. First of all, I loved Dave's comments about when you don't listen to your intuition. I know all about that. And I think, I've been a nurse practitioner for a very long time. And one of the things that I learned was to listen to my gut, my intuition, when I would be working with patients. And it would be things like, should I do that? Should I order this? No, I think we're okay for right now. It never steered me wrong. But where I'm going with this is that what I've learned, the first thing is for everyone to remember, every single person here, actually everybody on the planet, is intuitive. Mediumship is a skill where, and I am not a medium, okay, so I can't speak to that specifically. My understanding is that it is a skill that some people have enabled, where they're able to access that more divine wisdom, and sometimes very specifically from those who have passed. Quite often, I have spoken with mediums before, and that was my own experience. But where I'm going with this is that each of us has that little voice inside. And I think if you all stop for a minute, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I think we sometimes want to call things by names, when the reality is you're accessing intuition. And I definitely can speak to the after death communication. I can share with everybody that after my dad passed, it was several months, and it might have been a year and a half, but my mother had already died earlier. And it comes to me in dreams, and they're very clear, and they're very different than regular dreams. My dad and my mom were both standing on a deck with pine trees in the background. And the first thing that I noticed was how young they both looked. And my dad was a little more solid, but I could see through him, and I could really see through my mom. But what my dad said, I said, "My dad, you look great." And he goes, "Oh, it is so beautiful here, and I feel so good." And then they just kind of faded out. I'm like, "Oh, stop. I want to talk to you." But I think that, rather than put things in boxes, like sometimes we like to do, and we call this, and this, if each of us understands that intuition is a muscle. I mean, we all have it, and we just need to exercise it and learn to trust it. And quite often we do that the best when we can become still. Because I know a lot of times when I'm working with my clients, and I'll say particularly in the last 2 years, but I will get little downloads. I mean, this comes right in, and then I'll share with the person and say, "This is just what came in. Does this mean anything?" And they're like, "Oh yeah." So I think if each person just takes that time to listen to your inner guidance, not that you're not, I don't mean that, but listen more carefully, because it's pretty amazing what you can get. So that was what I wanted to say about the difference. I'm not really sure there's actually a difference per se.
Thank you.
May I chime in here about that?
Sure.
I'm really glad, Gail, you said that. I was actually going to say something about that. Part of it is when I grew up in another culture as well, and being mixed race, we are often labeled as this or that. And we tend to kind of go into, I practice this form of, whatever. I'm a yoga therapist as well, but, we tend to put it into these categories. And that's just our left brain needing to organize our thoughts, and so that we can have training programs, and so we can certify people and so on and so forth, really, ultimately. So I think there's a danger in when we begin to label as this is the practice of mediumship, and this is the practice of intuition, and this is the practice of the ADC, or there are just too many categorical things. And when Carla started to ask that question, immediately the spirit world opened up for me. And you said, Carla, it was your son that passed, is that right? Yeah. He actually came through, and I actually have a rule inside me that I always ask, is it okay for me to share? And then I got 3 yeses. I always wait 3 yeses. They have to be pretty strong in telling me that they want to reach you. So I muscle tested myself, I muscle tested him, muscle tested you, and 3 times, yes, yes, yes. And what your son was saying to me, to you, it's like, Mom, you've got to just pull back a little bit. You've worked so hard your entire life, and you've studied, you've provided, you work so extremely, extremely hard, harder than anybody I know. I'm so proud of you. And he says, and at the same time, Mom, stop labeling things and start categorizing them and start to organize it and start to plan so much. He says, come outside. I'm out here with you. Come outside, be around nature with me. I'm always with you. Have a little bit more unscheduled, less structured time for you, because that's where you'll find me. That's what he's saying to me to tell you. And I know you feel that, you could feel that, right? Yeah. So he says, I get it, Mommy, but you worry too much and you don't ask for help. In fact, he says, you're not very good at asking. So you should be asking me to come through to help you too, but you don't. You get too caught up in labeling this and that. And he says, just ask me. I'm around. I'm not busy. I'm here. So please ask him to support you and say, hey, do you want to create something creative with me? Okay. So have a little bit more of the joyfulness that it's in you. He says, you used to laugh. We used to laugh. What happened to you, Mom? Let's do that together. Let's do that together. I'm here. I'm here with you. All right. So stop the left brain from getting a little too, rolling forward. Like Dave said, it's like left brain is having a little bit of a fun time right now. Tell the left brain to say, enough with categorizing, enough. By September, I'm going to do this. By October, I must do this. I need to take a break till this point and this and that. He says, just let's sit back a little bit. Let's sit back a little bit. Okay. All right. So that's what he wanted to tell you. Yeah. He waves back at you too.
That's beautiful.
Thanks for letting me share.
Oh, for sure.
So Diana, we had switching topics. I think we have time for one more. If you have time, we have a comment here. Someone is hoping to deal with unresolved grief, and is hoping that some of the health issues that they have going on will improve. And says, I'm also helping to deal with my own mortality and realizing it's part of our life. So any advice about grief and how it helps resolve health issues? Anyone on this?
I will jump in here first and I used to always say with every new patient that I was referred, healing occurs from the inside out. And going back to the very first interview that the first speaker, Ashley Jones, had said, our bodies are meant and designed to heal. So, this unresolved, there's a number of things. By the time you feel physical problems, that means that spiritual wall, that seawall has imploded over to the emotional wall. And that emotional wall has spilled over into the physical wall. And so, when you start to feel physical things, you have to go back to the root source, and that's the soul anatomy. And one of the very first things I knew, I'd gone through a very turbulent year in 2019, and it had been just a death after my dad. And I went through this move, and there were so many different moving parts. I went to someone said, I said, I don't feel right. I don't feel right. And a friend of mine said, you know what? You should get your chakras checked. And I actually went to a health fair, and that was one of the first things. And they had this machine, and I stood there, and they put these electrodes on me, and I got, she did like a spiritual, chakra picture, and it was all off. So you start to feel spiritually, and we walk around thinking this is okay every day to feel like this. We get used to that. And I learned that with some of the speakers. I'm not sure if it was you, Dave, I can't remember, but we think that it's okay to feel just off. And that's one of the first signs as the precursor to chronic illness. So if anyone wants to jump in here, I'm sorry I was on a soapbox, but this is my Achilles heel. This is what I really want to do, is preventative medicine. And that's what this is all about, right? Anybody else wants to jump in, feel free with that question.
As a medical intuitive, I have found repressed grief at the root level of pretty much everything people have shown up with. Whether it's a muscle pain, fibromyalgia, anxiety, depression, fatigue, every one of these has repressed grief in it. It is the universal condition. So I think without doing an individual reading right now, obviously, And just to maybe give you some inspiration, only good things can happen when you process your grief, but physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, you name it. So I wish you luck on your journey, and thank you for that opportunity to share that.
Very well said. Anybody else?
Carla has her hand up. Carla Helbert. Do you want to unmute yourself, Carla? I think that's what you can do.
Oh, cool.
There you go.
Yay, thanks, Masami.
Yeah.
I would like to say in response to Stephanie's question too, that I really dislike that term unresolved grief. I like what Dave was saying, repressed grief. They're two different things. I think, that grief doesn't get resolved. I mean, grief is ongoing and grief is not pathological, and grief in a healthy, expressed way only serves to help us improve all layers of who we are: physical, mental, energetic, spiritual, intuitive, in all of those ways. And, was thinking about our talk when we talked, Diana, about how the physical body manifests with grief, because grief, and particularly traumatic grief, and I'm guessing most people on here have had traumatic grief, because those people are the ones who are generally trying to seek out the most help. When they do seek it out, it's because it's been so difficult. Is a huge stress response on the body. And when the body is constantly under traumatic stress, then that's an assault on the immune system and the adrenal system and the gut system and all of that. And that results in physical problems. But you can't just, look at the physical layer, because grief impacts us on every single layer of who we are. But I think one of the mistakes is in thinking that we need to resolve our grief, instead of, making sure, like Dave said, it's not being repressed, but we're finding a way to express it and allow it to move through all of those layers. And also really consciously working on how can we reduce our stress levels? How can we really work on self-care and good support, even in the times when we're in pain? And I think that's such a big key of reframing too how we think about our grief. And it's not the enemy, but also then caring for ourselves in nurturing ways. And some of it's very simple, like Masami was saying to the other Carla: get outside, get into nature, get in the sun, be with the trees. And that's also where we find our loved ones, because they are everywhere. But we tend to be able to access that energy and that love when we are in those same kinds of spaces where we are more relaxed, where we are less stressed. All of those things, it all leads to such an unfolding of the love and the beauty and the release and the relief of the stress piece of it. And that's where the places that need to be healed can be healed. So I have a soapbox on that too. So I'll just thank you.
I want to say just a few things about the unresolved grief. And I agree with you, Carla and Dave, for talking about this in a way that's so beautiful. Our goal isn't to resolve it, because as long as you're a human being on this earth, you will grieve. So that's number one. And I thought of, as a functional nutritional therapist, and I work with people's health and bodies, but if you were to try to breathe completely out of your lungs, which is you cannot do that actually. You will always have a residual air in your lungs, always. You have to have that. Otherwise, that last breath that you take and you empty completely out, that means you're done in this physical body. So you always have that residual, if you want to call it that. And I also believe that the residual grief makes poetry. It's what makes music. It's what makes us lean towards beauty. So, if a poet, think of Rumi even. Rumi has struggled so much throughout his life, or some of these Irish poets, that writes these glorious poetries. they can't write these things if they did not know what grief is. And that residual grief is what fuels them to write the poetry. And also, if the musicians, like even Beethoven, if Beethoven did not know what grief is, to lose the hearing when you are a musician, I mean, can you imagine the grief he held in his heart, in his visceral nervous system? If he didn't have that, he couldn't have created his Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, you know, and all the other ones too. But so we need to really stop ourselves a little bit and say, we like to put things into a box that is, this is something to be avoided. This is something that I need to promote. It's not so clear cut, black and white. We all live in all shades of gray. So if we can remember that and be in that gray area a little bit more and that's when you get to tap into your true creativity. And that's when you get to tap into your true healing. So don't be afraid of that residual grief.
Yes, very well said. And I want to thank everyone. I don't know if we have, Eric, do we have any last questions?
I think that was all the main questions. I'm going to go ahead and put Diana's email in the chat box if anyone wants to contact her after. And I think Diana's going to go ahead and close out by talking about what's coming up next.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Eric. First off, anyone needs an awesome guy, an awesome IT guru, I would never want to lose Eric, but he's amazing and he saved this summit. So you can always reach out to me to get his deets. And so I want to thank you, Eric, for making this an amazing experience. I couldn't have done this without you. So big kudos to you. And what's coming up next is I had an overwhelming response about the interview series. People wanted to know, if they could get it later. And we want to we're going to put it together very quickly for people and make it very affordable for people to have as just like I wanted to do it as an online program because there's so many resources that all of you give. And it's hard to just get it in a one quick little 30-minute interview. So stay tuned. You can email me and, I will keep you posted on all of it. And in a few weeks, I'm going to be doing a webinar, and not a webinar, Eric corrected me on that, but it'll be another live Zoom event. And I manifested transitioning my father. So I help people to intuitively manifest. If you would be interested in manifesting in communication with your loved one on the other side, that's what this event is going to be about. So I will keep you posted, and there'll be lots more to come. And I appreciate every single person that's been on this communal support. I'm going to figure out a way for us to I'm going to keep the Journey Through Grief with Grace page open. So please, email me, look for stuff in there, and we're just going to build the community. So thank you so much.